Little Emma sat in the daycare, her eyes confused as she waited for her parents to arrive. This wasn't the first time that a parent was running late, however, so the employees were not concerned yet. They were sure her parents would show up soon. But the truth was that something was terribly wrong. And upon finding out what happened, they would immediately have to call 911. As the police arrived at the scene, it became clear that something horrible was going on. Emma's parents hadn't simply forgotten to come and pick her up from the daycare, and they weren't stuck in traffic either. That much was clear. No, this was something much more serious. Emma's parents were nowhere to be found, and the police started an investigation to track them down. Nobody had seen or heard from them the entire day, which was very unlike them. All signs pointed to them being in trouble, and the police knew they had no time to lose. They needed to find them as soon as possible. However, they didn't seem to get any closer to finding Emma's parents. The deeper their investigation went, the more questions they had. The two of them seemed to have gotten involved in some big trouble. But what happened to Emma's parents? Where were they? And would the police ever find them? "I want my mommy," Emma softly cried as she desperately looked at the door, waiting for her parents to finally come and pick her up. "It's okay, Emma. I'm sure she'll be right here," Miss Lauren told her, and she patted her shoulder. There wasn't a hair on her head that was worried yet, but soon she would realize the gravity of the situation. Miss Lauren continued to clean up the daycare while keeping an eye on Emma. It had been a chaotic day, and there were toys scattered all over the place. Luckily, she wasn't in a hurry to leave, and it wasn't an issue for her to stay a bit longer and wait for Emma's parents to come and get her. But she would have to stay there a lot longer than expected. After 15 minutes had passed, and nobody had picked up Emma yet, Lauren decided to give the girl's mother a call. Normally, the woman was always on time, but perhaps she was stuck in traffic, or she had simply not seen the time. Lauren looked up her number in the system and dialed it, still blissfully unaware of what was going on. She listened to the ringing for a while, but no one answered the phone. Lauren didn't think much of it and continued to clean up the playroom, but she asked Emma to help her now. The girl still looked really sad, and Lauren thought that some distraction might help her. She tried making a game out of it, and soon enough, Emma felt much better. Emma ran around the room, putting all the toys back in their designated places and making up stories about them. She was giggling the whole time, and Lauren was happy to see the smile back on the little girl's face. But she did start having a strange feeling about this now. Emma's parents still hadn't arrived, or even called to let her know they were running late. "Here, sweetie, why don't you make a drawing for me?" she said to Emma, as she handed her a coloring book and some pencils, and she sat down behind her desk. She called Emma's mother again, but when she did not answer, she looked up her father's number in the system and tried calling him instead. When he did not answer either, Lauren started getting worried. She doubted whether she should call the emergency contacts Emma's parents had given the daycare or wait a bit longer. This didn't seem like an emergency yet, but Lauren couldn't sit and wait here forever. She glanced at Emma, who was completely focused on the drawing, and decided to give her grandmother a call. She listened to the ringing tone, and she let out a sigh of relief when the call was answered. "Good evening, Mrs. Matthews. This is Lauren from Emma's daycare." She introduced herself, but before she could even continue, she was interrupted by a hysterical voice. "Emma! Emma! Oh no! Is my little Emma okay? What happened to her?" "Mrs. Matthews, I can assure you that Emma is doing just fine. Don't worry, please. I'm calling about her parents. I haven't been able to get in touch with them, and I wondered if you could try to reach them instead. Do you happen to know where they are?" Lauren finally continued after Emma's grandmother calmed down. Mrs. Matthews hadn't heard from Emma's parents all day, but she immediately hung up to try and call them. Minutes later, she called Lauren back with some bad news. They weren't answering the phone to her either. It was already getting late now, and Lauren was at a loss for what to do. But it was clear that she couldn't just sit there and wait. She decided to drive by Emma's house first, and if nobody was there, she would drop her off at her grandma's. "Come on, Emma, I'll bring you home now," she said, but Emma immediately looked upset again. "But where is Mommy? Won't she pick me up?" she asked, and her bottom lip already started quivering. "I want my Mommy." When Lauren finally managed to calm Emma down, they got in the car and drove to the house that was listed as Emma's home address. But when they arrived, Lauren's eyes widened in surprise at what they found. "Oh no!" she exclaimed. This was when she realized that something was horribly wrong. Lauren and Emma stood before the dark, quiet house, a stark contrast to the usually lively home. Lauren's heart raced as she gripped Emma's hand tightly. The absence of lights, cars, or any sign of life was unsettling. With a deep breath to steady her nerves, Lauren knew what she had to do. "It's going to be okay, Emma," she whispered, more to reassure herself than the little girl. She reached for her phone, her decision made. It was time to call for help. Lauren's voice quivered as she explained the situation to the 911 dispatcher. "We're at 42 Westwood Lane. It's Emma's house. It's just so dark, and no one's answering." With each question from the dispatcher, Lauren's unease grew. Where were Emma's parents? Why was the house in such a state? She clutched the phone tighter, her other hand holding Emma close. As she spoke, the reality of their situation sank in deeper. The wait for the police felt endless. Lauren paced the front yard, her eyes darting to every shadow and sound. Emma stood close, her small hand gripping Lauren's skirt. The little girl's eyes were wide with fear, a silent cry for the comfort of her parents. Lauren knelt down, enveloping Emma in a reassuring embrace. "They'll be here soon. The police will help us find your Mommy and Daddy," she murmured, trying to offer solace amidst the swirling uncertainty. The sound of sirens cut through the night, a beacon of hope in the oppressive silence. Bright lights flooded the area as police cars pulled up, officers stepping out with purpose and urgency. Lauren felt a wave of relief, her shoulders sagging slightly as help finally arrived. The officers approached, their expressions serious and attentive. "We need to check the house," one said, moving toward the front door. Lauren and Emma watched, their future hinging on what the officers would find. The officers entered the house, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. Lauren waited outside with Emma, the silence between them heavy with anticipation. Inside, the beams of light revealed a scene of abrupt departure. A half-eaten meal on the table, a jacket draped over a chair, a favorite toy lying forgotten on the floor. The house felt frozen in time, as if its occupants had vanished into thin air. As the officers continued their search, it became clear that this was only the beginning of a much deeper mystery. As the officers swept through each room, the house echoed back with the silent testimony of a hasty departure. A toppled vase, its flowers wilted and water spilled, lay forgotten. Pictures were askew, drawers partially open, clothes strewn as if in a frantic search. The stillness was unsettling, the only sounds being the officers' footsteps and the distant murmur of their voices. Lauren, standing at the threshold, could feel the tension in the air. The disarray spoke volumes, and none of it was reassuring. In the dim glow of the squad car's interior light, Lauren recounted all she knew to a solemn-faced officer. She spoke of Emma's parents, always punctual, caring, and involved in their daughter's life. "It's just not like them to disappear," she insisted, her voice steady, but her eyes filled with worry. As she spoke, she glanced at Emma, who was being comforted by another officer. Lauren's heart ached, knowing the weight of the situation was far beyond what a child should bear. The police station was a maze of cold, sterile corridors and harsh fluorescent lights. Emma sat in a small room with toys and books, a space meant to ease the fears of children caught in the grip of the law. But the unfamiliar environment only served to heighten her anxiety. She clutched a teddy bear, a temporary guardian in this strange place. Every time the door opened, her eyes lifted with a flicker of hope, only to dim as she realized it wasn't her parents coming for her. When Mrs. Matthews, Emma's grandmother, arrived, the little girl ran into her arms, seeking the familiar comfort only family could provide. "It's all right, my dear," she cooed, stroking Emma's hair as she held her close. Mrs. Matthews's eyes met Lauren's over Emma's head, sharing a moment of unspoken understanding and fear. Though her presence was a balm to Emma's unsettled heart, the questions and the unknowns lingered, heavy in the air around them. With the house secured and initial statements taken, the police began their methodical process. They delved into the parents' lives, looking for any clue, any thread that might explain their sudden disappearance. Friends, relatives, and co-workers were contacted, each interview painting a picture of a normal, happy family with no known enemies. But somewhere in the mundane details, the officers knew, lay the key to unraveling the mystery. The investigation was now in full swing, the search for truth just beginning. Word of the disappearance spread through the community like wildfire. Neighbors whispered in hushed tones, their faces etched with concern and disbelief. Offers of assistance poured in. People were ready to form search parties, provide meals, and do whatever was necessary to support the search. The sense of unity was palpable. A small town coming together in the face of a shared fear, all of them hoping for a swift and safe resolution to the unsettling mystery. Among the whispers and shared concerns, a new piece of information surfaced. Several neighbors reported seeing an unfamiliar car in the area around the time of the disappearance. It was an oddity, they said, a vehicle that lingered a little too long, its occupants watching a little too intently. This lead invigorated the police, offering a new direction in their investigation. The description of the car was circulated, and the hunt for its whereabouts began. The police reviewed security footage from nearby stores and traffic cameras, tracing the parents' movements on the day they vanished. The videos showed them running errands, their expressions tight with an unspoken worry. The footage provided a timeline, a path to follow, but it was the last clip that deepened the mystery. It showed the parents' car speeding away, a sense of urgency in its quick departure that raised more questions than it answered. The urgency in the last known footage of the parents was unmistakable. Their car moved with purpose, weaving through traffic, the couple inside glancing back as if they were being pursued. It was clear they were running from something or someone, a threat that had instilled a palpable fear. The police scrutinized the footage, looking for any clue about what might have been chasing them, but the answer remained just out of reach, hidden in the shadows of uncertainty. As news of the parents' last known movements spread, the community's worry turned into action. Volunteers organized search parties, combing through the areas the parents might have gone. Posters with their faces were distributed, meetings were held, and resources were pooled to aid the investigation. The town, once a quiet and unassuming place, was now a hub of activity, united in a common goal: to bring Emma's parents back home safely. In the quiet of Mrs. Matthews's living room, Emma played with her toys, seemingly lost in her own world. But then, she looked up and whispered about a bad man her parents had mentioned. This simple statement, coming from the innocence of a child, sent a shiver down Mrs. Matthews's spine and was promptly relayed to the police. Emma's words, vague yet ominous, provided a new and vital clue, hinting at a possible motive behind the mysterious disappearance. Encouraged gently by her grandmother and a kind officer, Emma began to share more. She recalled fragments of overheard conversations, her parents' voices tinged with worry. They spoke of money, danger, and a pressing need to protect something important. Though her understanding was limited, the snippets Emma provided were like pieces of a puzzle, revealing a picture of adults caught in a web of financial and personal peril. Emma's innocent recollections prompted the investigators to take a closer look at the parents' finances. They dug through bank statements, emails, and other financial records, looking for anomalies or signs of distress. Emma's mention of a bad man and her parents' hushed talks of money painted a troubling picture. It became increasingly clear that the key to unlocking the mystery might lie in understanding the financial pressures that had been shadowing the family. With each new piece of evidence, the investigators worked to create a coherent narrative from Emma's statements: the strange car, the urgent escape, and the parents' financial records. Connections began to form, subtle threads linking seemingly unrelated facts. The puzzle was complex, with missing pieces and unclear edges, but each discovery, each small revelation, brought them closer to the truth. As the investigation deepened, so did the mystery. With every question answered, two more arose. The parents' lives, once thought to be an open book, revealed hidden chapters filled with secrets and unknowns. The community's concern grew into a palpable tension, the urgency to find answers mounting with each passing day. The case was no longer just a missing persons investigation. It was a labyrinth of financial intrigue, personal danger, and desperate secrets, all revolving around one terrified little girl and her missing parents. With Emma's insights as their beacon, the police intensified their search, re-examining every detail through the lens of the new leads. Teams were dispatched to follow up on the strange car, while others delved deeper into the financial angle, sifting through transactions and contacts. The force was mobilized with a renewed sense of purpose, each officer determined to unravel the web of mystery surrounding the family's disappearance. The investigators spoke with co-workers, neighbors, and friends, each conversation shedding a bit more light on the days leading up to the disappearance. They painted a picture of a couple under immense stress, their usual cheer overshadowed by hushed arguments and anxious glances. These accounts added layers to the emerging narrative, suggesting that the parents were grappling with issues far more serious than anyone outside the family had realized. The local community, spurred by concern and a desire to help, joined the search efforts. Organized groups scoured nearby woods, fields, and abandoned buildings, while others distributed flyers and raised awareness online. It was a sea of people united by a single goal: to find Emma's parents and bring them home. Their collective effort was a testament to the bonds of community in the face of adversity. In the midst of the search, a significant discovery was made. Hidden in the recesses of the parents' home office, tucked away in a seemingly innocuous place, was a USB drive. Its contents unknown, it seemed deliberately concealed, hinting at secrets someone was desperate to keep. The find sent a ripple of excitement through the investigative team, a potential breakthrough lying within the small metallic device. The USB drive was handed over to specialists, experts in digital forensics, who set to work breaking through its encryption. It was a race against time, each moment spent decrypting the drive, a moment the parents remained missing. As the technicians worked, The investigators waited with bated breath, hoping that within the digital confines lay the answers they desperately sought. The tension was palpable, the air thick with anticipation, and the heavy weight of unanswered questions. When the encryption finally broke, a flood of documents and emails poured forth from the USB drive. They were cryptic, filled with coded language and veiled references, but clearly important. Transactions, meeting notes, and frantic email exchanges painted a picture of desperation and secrecy. The investigators pored over every file, realizing that they were now glimpsing the hidden part of the parents' lives that had likely led to their disappearance. Attention turned to Emma's father's workplace, a seemingly prosperous company with a reputable facade. However, the documents hinted at something darker beneath the surface. There were references to off-the-book deals and urgent meetings, suggesting a financial crisis or illicit activities. The police started to question his co-workers and delve into the company's records, suspecting that the key to the mystery might lie within the office walls where Emma's father had spent his days. As the investigation intensified, a breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A known criminal, recently arrested on unrelated charges, mentioned a job that sounded eerily similar to the circumstances surrounding the parents' disappearance. The police, seizing this unexpected lead, dug deeper into his past and connections, hoping he might unwittingly guide them to the people responsible for the family's plight. The suspect, realizing the gravity of his situation, became a critical focal point in the investigation. The police, armed with new information, tracked him down to a rundown apartment on the city's outskirts. A tense standoff ensued, with officers surrounding the building and negotiators trying to coax him out. The neighborhood watched in suspense as the drama unfolded, a potential breakthrough in the case hinging on the suspect's next move. After hours of negotiation, the suspect finally surrendered and was taken into custody. Under intense questioning, he admitted to being part of the scheme that led to the parents' disappearance. However, he was reticent about revealing his employer, the mastermind behind the operation. He hinted at powerful figures with far-reaching influence, instilling a sense of dread in the investigators. It was clear that the case was bigger and more dangerous than they had initially thought. The interrogation room was a battleground of wills as the police applied increasing pressure on the suspect. They knew he was the key to unlocking the wider mystery, but his fear of retribution kept him silent on critical details. The officers pressed on, their questions sharp and relentless, each refusal to answer only strengthening their resolve. They needed to crack his defenses, to unearth the truth that lay buried in his silence. Despite the suspect's reluctance to divulge the full story, his fragmented admissions and veiled hints provided new leads. Investigators feverishly connected these scraps of information with the evidence they had, forming a clearer picture of the events leading to the disappearance. Each new revelation reshaped their understanding, guiding them along a path fraught with twists and turns, but steadily leading toward the truth. In a quiet, comforting room, Emma spoke with a child psychologist, her words halting but sincere. As she described places her parents had taken her, places they said were important, her memories became a beacon. The police listened intently, mapping her descriptions to real-world locations. Her innocent recollection of a scary place her daddy mentioned became a pivotal clue, narrowing down the search area to a few possible locations. The breakthrough came when one of Emma's described locations matched a place mentioned by the suspect. It was an abandoned industrial area, known for its seclusion and forgotten by time. The investigative team, energized by this lead, coordinated a search operation. As they prepared to move out, the air was thick with tension and anticipation. Could this be where they would finally find Emma's parents? The search became a race against time. Each passing moment could mean the difference between life and death for Emma's parents. Helicopters buzzed overhead as teams on the ground moved quickly through the decrepit buildings and overgrown fields. The urgency was palpable, each officer acutely aware of the stakes. They moved with precision and speed, driven by the hope that they were finally closing in on the location where the parents were being held. The abandoned industrial area was a landscape of despair, a place where hope seemed to have no foothold. Buildings stood like silent sentinels, their windows shattered, their facades crumbling. As the search teams moved in, the enormity of the task became clear. Fear and hope warred within each member as they began their search, the quiet eeriness of the place settling like a weight upon their shoulders. The teams split up, covering every inch of the sprawling area. They called out, their voices echoing off the silent walls, hoping for any sign of life. The sound of footsteps, the rustle of searching, filled the air as they moved through buildings and around rusting equipment. Every second was precious, every cleared room both a relief and a disappointment. The tension grew with each passing minute, the desire to find the parents driving them forward. In a neglected building, far from the main road, a team heard a faint, desperate sound. They rushed toward it, their hearts pounding. There, in a dimly lit room, they found Emma's parents. They were weak, barely conscious, but alive. It was a scene that would forever be etched in the minds of the rescuers. The dramatic discovery of two people who had been lost to the world, clinging to the last threads of hope. The news of the discovery spread quickly, and soon an ambulance was racing to the scene. Emma's parents were brought out into the sunlight, the fresh air a stark contrast to the darkness they had endured. At the hospital, when Emma and her grandmother arrived, the reunion was an outpouring of tears, hugs, and whispered words of love and relief. It was a moment of profound emotion, a family brought back from the brink. As word of the rescue spread, the story captured the nation's heart. News crews descended upon the town, eager to cover the dramatic turn of events. The family's ordeal was recounted on television screens and in newspapers, a tale of fear, hope, and ultimately, survival. The nation watched, moved by the strength of the family and the tireless efforts of the community and police. It was a story that resonated with many, a reminder of the resilience of the human spirit in the face of darkness. In the quiet of the hospital room, as the parents slowly regained their strength, the weight of their experience hung heavy in the air. They spoke in hushed tones, discussing how to address the public about their ordeal. The decision was fraught with uncertainty and fear, but they knew staying silent wasn't an option. They had survived for a reason, and now they faced the daunting task of sharing their story with the world. With the nation watching, the parents held a press conference. The room was heavy with anticipation as they began to speak. They revealed the financial scandal they had uncovered, one that implicated powerful figures and exposed deep-seated corruption. It was the reason for their abduction, a desperate attempt to silence them. As they spoke, their voices were steady, their resolve clear. They would not be intimidated into silence. The truth had to be known. The revelations sent shockwaves through the community and the nation. People watched in disbelief as the extent of the scandal was laid bare. The news cycled continuously, dissecting every detail, every implication. The community was in an uproar, grappling with the betrayal of trust and the bravery of the family that had brought the corruption to light. The nation was forced to confront the reality of what had been hidden in the shadows. In the wake of the revelations, the wheels of justice began to turn. Arrests were made, investigations launched, and the once untouchable figures found themselves facing the consequences of their actions. The family, once victims, now stood at the center of a movement for justice and transparency. Their ordeal had sparked a nationwide demand for accountability, and they watched as the system they had challenged began to realign itself toward truth. Through their ordeal, the family had become unlikely heroes, symbols of courage, and advocates for change. They used their newfound platform to speak out for transparency and justice, their story inspiring others to stand up against corruption and secrecy. As they healed from their physical and emotional wounds, they looked to the future with hope, committed to using their experience to make a difference. Their journey had been one of unimaginable fear, but it had led them to a place of purpose and promise. The day of the ceremony dawned bright and clear, a new chapter in the family's journey. They dressed with care, each aware of the significance of the event. It was not just a ceremony in their honor, it was a testament to their survival and the impact of their story. As they left for the venue, they shared quiet looks of understanding. A family bonded by adversity and strengthened by unity. Emma, now older and more aware of the world's complexities, prepared to speak at the event. She had grown so much since the dark days of her parents' disappearance, her innocence tempered by experience. Yet her spirit remained undimmed, her resolve strong. As she looked at her speech, her hand steady, her family's pride in her was evident. She was not just a victim, she was a voice. The room fell silent as Emma took the stage. Her voice was clear and strong as she spoke about the importance of truth and bravery. She talked about the darkness they had faced and the light of hope that had guided them through. Her words resonated with the audience, a poignant reminder of the strength that lies within each person to confront injustice and fight for what is right. The family's ordeal had sparked a movement within the community and beyond. Their courage had led to significant reforms, greater transparency, and a renewed focus on ethical accountability. People were more aware, more engaged, and more committed to ensuring such events never happened again. The change was palpable, a ripple effect that started with one family's fight and spread to touch countless lives. As the ceremony came to a close, the family stood together, looking out at the faces of friends, supporters, and strangers who had been touched by their story. They had come through the darkness and were now stepping into the light of a new day. Their future was one of advocacy and hope, a commitment to using their voices for change. The road ahead would not be easy, but they were ready to face it together. A family forever changed, but unbroken.